Good afternoon, listeners and viewers, and welcome to another program of the News Behind the News with Ralph Kintav right here on Mix 94.7 FM. And today I have another special guest here with me. And my guest today is Mr. Alex Gumbs, the new CEO of Port St Maarten Group. Good afternoon and welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ralph, for the invite here on your new program, The News Behind the News. On behalf of Port St Maarten Group, of course, we thank you for the opportunity and look forward to this discussion.
Yes, I definitely look forward to the discussion as well. For one, congratulations on being the new CEO of the port. But before we get into the meat of the matter and some other interesting details, tell us a bit about yourself. Basically, what is the story of you becoming CEO?
That's an interesting icebreaker indeed, Ralph. So, my person, born and raised in St. Maarten, went to Milton Peters College. At the age of 18, I left and I went to the Netherlands to study. I actually was living in the north of the Netherlands, Groningen, where I got a bachelor's of commerce, marketing and sales, and specialized in retailing and franchising. I lived in the Netherlands for a bit more than 6 years, went to school, worked, and had an amazing time. During that period, I had two opportunities actually to connect with Port St. Maarten as an intern, and also during my thesis. And, that really opened a door to me in terms of really seeing what the industry has to offer. But, even looking further back than that, Ralph, and this is a story I often share with students and, close friends, that I look back at my days in high school and so I went to MAVO first and I went to HAVO after. And both my diplomas from MAV and HAVO actually had cruise tourism written on it. So I actually have cruise tourism written on my diploma when I was 16 and also when I was 18, because the final projects I did about cruise. And, strange enough, it's only until I actually graduated from college in the Netherlands and I was scanning all of my diplomas to the HR manager at the time. And I realized, oh, wow, look at this. My MAVO diploma has cruise on it. HAVO diploma has cruise on it. My internship was in regard to cruising. And also my thesis was in regard to cruising. And, it all, sometimes in life things happens unconsciously, and it takes a moment that really triggers it. And at that point in time, I was triggered, and I said, "Oh wow, look at this!" And I think it really got kicked off from there.
Okay, that's great. So that's pretty interesting. And you mentioned your thesis, which I understood was about staying competitive in a already competitive world, something along those lines.
Correct. So the thesis at the time was winning in a competitive environment. And
Gotcha.
at the end of the day,
Interesting title, man.
Yeah, at the end of the day, St. Maarten, yes, we are on the winning edge of things, but competition is quite fierce out there. And the older folks always say, it's one thing to get to the top, but how do you maintain to the top?
Yeah.
And that's where it came from. How do you continue to win in such a fierce, competitive environment?
Okay. So one of the interesting things about your journey as well is the fact that you worked at Carnival Cooperation.
Yeah.
Could you share, a bit of details on your experience there, and also what do such corporations really look for when it comes to destinations like ours?
Yeah. So that discussion in terms of Carnival Cooperation is quite interesting. I would never forget, after Irma, Carnival was actually one of the first cruise brands to send representatives to St. Maarten. I believe they flew 9 days after Hurricane Irma to the island on a private jet. And when they came, they said, we're not coming to bear gifts. We're not coming to make promises, but we just came to hug you guys and say, you are our partners. We are with you through this. Wherever we can facilitate, we will. So that stuck with me. And over the course of the months after Irma, I also had a closer working relationship, not only with that particular brand, but in the industry in general. And I had additional responsibilities as well, where persons were truly able to see how I engage, but also the prompt responses and assuring that if something is committed, that we would live up to it. And after that period of time, persons started speaking to me in terms of potentially coming on the other side of the business. And eventually in early 2019, let's say late 2018, early 2019, we came to some sort of agreement in terms of me potentially going to the other side. I must say the other side was extremely interesting. For many years, I think the discussions locally amongst my peers and associates were to understand, what really goes through the minds of the cruise executives, what really, what are they really focused on in terms of destinations? And I got a chance to see that and experience that. And, it's truly hard work. It's truly dedication. My schedule, I was living in the Bahamas at the time. So I was living in Freeport, Bahamas. And I was the director of the cruise port in Turks and Caicos, Grand Turk. And we were also in the process of developing, which will be Carnival's largest cruise port in Freeport, Bahamas. So I was also on that project. And, one of the things during that period of time was just the constant traveling. I think I was traveling something like every 8 to 10 days. Wow. At times, 2 days of traveling consecutively. So it was quite interesting. It really opened my opportunity, not only from the cruise side, but to connect with other destinations as well. While I was with Carnival Corp, in the initial stages of the pandemic, we had various discussions with government officials in St Maarten as well, as I am from here. But the experience, it's different, Ralph. It's fast going. It's very corporate. And that is something that, I think is missing to an extent here. A sense of a culture that the port will be going through as well in terms of processes and procedures and, really streamlining elements. I do miss that. And since I'm back, I think we've already discussed certain elements to be implemented. But I do feel and like that corporate culture. We're all Caribbean people, so we're all, to an extent, very informal. Yeah. And that is good. Yeah. That is good from a person's to person's perspective. But the word accountability and responsibility frequently falls shy by having a too informal culture and atmosphere. So we're actually looking at the company's culture and processes and the engagement of staff and working towards, let's say, rebuilding, rebranding Port St Maarten Group. We know over the last few years, the image been damaged. There's many things that are still following us. So it's like we have a long tail still following us. Internally, as I said, through processes, procedures, we are looking at revitalizing that image. And for us, it's about being transparent as well. Building trust in the community, building trust from the stakeholders that with the new leadership, along with key items that we will be going through, that Port St Maarten will be once again one of the best companies. I think it's still one of the greatest companies on the island, but there's still a lot of work to be done. Okay, because I would like to definitely segue, which you kind of touch on my next question, which was basically what are your priorities as an incoming CEO, but also how do you particularly intend to boost the port's position in the region, given the competition as well? Yeah. As you mentioned, correct. Corporate cutthroat, very cutthroat business. And, our business is segmented across two main pillars, being cruise and cargo. And for me as CEO, thankfully, I had the opportunity prior to being confirmed as CEO to work along with the port for many years. So I'm fully aware of some of the strategic elements that was in the pipelines. Early on this year as well, I was part of the team that actually created, along with a third-party company, the high-level plan 2021 to 2031. In that plan, we really identified key objectives across our business pillars that should be achieved, let's say, within the 3 to 10-year mark. So we have 2 years, let's say, to prepare, source, tender, etc. And within a 3 to 7 year mark, before the 10-year mark, to roll out certain key projects. Yeah. Correct. And, Ralph, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits. So, if you look at the business, there's a lot of low-hanging fruits which we can tackle short-term. In terms of offering better experiences as well from a cruise perspective. The stakeholders play a huge role in that because the success of the port is not much more or less than the success of the destination and the services and offerings of the destination. At the end of the day, as a port, we see ourselves as a logistic hub. So we bring people transit in and transit out. We try and mimic the experience on a ship on the port facilities, that you don't have a shock and awe type of effect. We're working on port experiences in the port itself, from a branding standpoint, from a just an experience standpoint to, let's say, in other words, get up to the time. I said it in Parliament recently that, one of the things that I think we're lacking on, and as a port as well, is the Instagrammable moments. So on the entire port facilities, there's like 2 key areas that passengers really take photos of. But if there's not key elements tied to that, then your reach is lost.
Yeah.
So, for example, you can take a beautiful sign in front of a St Maarten, let's say, statue.
Yeah.
But where's the call to action? What do you want those passengers to do with that photo? Where do you want them to share it? And what you on the other side going to do with that photo once they reshare it? Are you going to also reshare it on your social media pages?
Correct.
Are you going to engage them in some sort of a giveaway prize? So the call to action is something that I think is key. And for me, very important, in which I also made mention in one of the recent press releases, is the growth of our staff, the enhancing of our staff, the building of skills within our staff group, creating a sense of organizational citizenship, that when persons get up in the morning, they feel like they really want to go work and be part of a team, rather than thinking, hey, I need to go work because I have bills to pay. And quite oftenly, unfortunately, it's the latter. But by changing the culture and by engaging and creating activities, even though, and we all know there's limited budgets available at this point in time, most companies been through extreme financial situations due to the pandemic and also a rollover from Irma. There are certain decrees that's currently in place, national decrees that still to be, let's say, confirmed based on the ombudsman case, if that 12.5% would have to be effective. But Ralph, as a person and my person as a young professional, you could only imagine that there's discussions in terms of cutting of benefits. But at the same time, we're expecting those persons to put in more than 100% right now, because now it's really do or die business, right? Because the industry is returning back fresh, and we need to be on our A game. But at the same time, we need to find ways in motivating staff to give that A game,
Correct.
even though potentially there may be cuts of benefits. It's quite a interesting time, so to speak, to lead these organizations. And it goes a long way in speaking with people and explaining people, hey, this is not by choice. Yes, as a company, we've made responsible cuts. As a company, we've gone way beyond in terms of other facets and operating efficient.
Have you had to lay off staff?
No, we have not. And that was a concisive decision that we would not do.
Okay.
We will not engage in those discussions. We will make any other adjustments that's needed. But no, we are not and will not lay off any staff at Port St Maarten.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned several things that, again, touch into several questions I had. But one of them I would like to get into first. You mentioned in terms of training of the staff and so forth. Is also because given the technical nature of also your job and your team, what are the types of training that you do and that they participate in? So
it's really diverse based on the departments. So right now, for example, recently our maritime team, some members were going through STCW training. Locally at the West Indian Maritime School in Colbay.
Okay.
So, that's also interesting now that there's opportunities to do certain trainings locally. So, of course, that saves on costs, etc. And they are doing that. From a securities perspective, the team do frequent ISPS trainings. They do frequent trainings in terms of working with our logistics system. So, some of our guards actually have additional roles. Besides just being a security guard, monitoring the safety and security within the facilities, they actually do assist with logging certain data at certain data points in terms of pre-announcing, because again, as I mentioned, it's a ISPS facility, so International Shipping Port Security, which is an international standard. And they are also trained to work within our logistics system in terms of pre-announcing persons, in terms of assuring that if a bus pulled up for a tour, that bus actually has, or the ownership actually has, a concession with Port St Maarten. So there, some of them jobs go beyond that. And then from a staff perspective, recently we had a trainer on island, and looking at it from a customer service perspective, but also from a team building perspective. So there's different elements, different facets in terms of training, but also there's also requests from staff, which at this point in time obviously is difficult. But there's staff who also want to pursue a associate's degree to further in their role at a port, or a bachelor's degree, or a master's degree. So those are all requests that we receive as well, and we look to see what best fits within the respective role of that person and how that request would benefit the overall knowledge within the facility. Because
that's
to
interesting.
be quite honest, I was one who did it. I mean, I sponsored it myself in terms of my master's degree, but I saw the benefit at the time in obtaining a master's degree while I was working. And that really assisted me in, I would say, Caribbean lingo. That assisted me in improving my game. And also, based on the experiences that I had from a work perspective, also assisted me in completing the master's as well, because all of a sudden, the real life situations came to play from a management side.
Into the theory.
Correct. So
gotcha.
it was quite interesting, and those are some of the requests that we receive. We also obviously entertain requests for internships. We do receive a lot of requests, so it goes through the HR department, and we filter to see really what requests would fill the voids within the various departments. But giving interns those opportunities as well. And I said it in a recent press release that had I not have that opportunity to be at a port as an intern, I probably would have not been sitting here today having this great discussion with you, Ralph, as young professionals, being the CEO of Port St Maarten Group, one of the best, in my opinion, still one of the best companies on island, and also a company that has far-reaching responsibilities in terms of economic contribution. I always refer to the port and the cruise piers and the cargo pier as lifelines to the destination. They are like veins where the blood comes through, blood being the passengers and or the containers that support our economies. It is an important institution, and by all means, we're going to put everything into it to assure that business resumes, business comes back, that we grow the business, but at the same time, we do it very responsible. We garner a sense of trust from the community, and at the same time, we're looking forward and improving on our cooperation with local stakeholders as well.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned that bit on internships and stuff, because, often students, in general, we refer to the study financing list and what St Maarten needs. But particularly as CEOs of the port, or Port St Maarten, what are the study areas out there that you would recommend students consider? Because often you may see students going to business management or a general hospitality study, but can you elaborate a bit more on what options some students should consider, whether it's in IT and so forth?
Now, again, I would speak predominantly in the first part of this question in terms of our line of business. So from a maritime perspective, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we had a local who started working at a port within the maritime department as a deckhand to the pilot boat. He later became a captain of the pilot boat, and he showed extreme confidence and interest in actually becoming a pilot. And along with him, the port worked along and assisted financially with him going to the Netherlands for a few years. I believe he was in the Netherlands for 5 or 6 years to complete his maritime degree. And today, and I'll call his name, Mr. Joshua Johnson, is one of the great pilots, young pilots, around our age as well at Port St Maarten Group.
Nice.
Now, that is something that you don't frequently come across. But again, in his case, it started by him first having a intermediate position within the port, and then that expanded his vision. That was the click for him to think, hey, I should go further. I can go further and I will go further. And I think that is a void that we have still. That is something as a port. We are going to look and see how best we can work with institutions or organizations locally to create that maritime thinking from young. I think one of the key or interesting programs that there is right now is the Kids at Sea program, or you can call it a Zero to Hero program, where these kids go through vigorous trainings for 3 to 6 months, and they learn from building boats, fixing engines, sailing, becoming powerboat captains, as I mentioned earlier, STCW, first aid training. I mean, that's amazing, right? Those are triggers. Those are, besides that, you look at, some of the programs you have in the lagoon as well. On the weekends, you'll see the little kids, 6, 7 years old, in the dinghies, sailing and racing. But we have such a beautiful island. We have such beautiful waters. I was just recently to another Caribbean destination. I say, man, the water is here so rough. It's a pity for you guys because they can't really cater to
tap into
the sailing and cruisers type of market because the waters are just too rough. So we are blessed for our geographic location in that regard, but also from a port perspective, I also see potential in us trying to get more youngsters involved from a maritime perspective. So again, pilots, maritime lawyers. You have port management, which my colleague who's recently promoted, Rosina, did port management in Jamaica. Those are all opportunities, and you don't necessarily need to go to the Netherlands or to the US. There's courses that you can follow here locally, get work experience, and build on top of it, as opportunities.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. Now to go back to one more thing that you previously mentioned in regards to the long tail. Given recent history with the port, will that will that affect or impact the strategic plan that you have in place?
Hopefully not, Ralph. Hopefully not. Many items are still in process, and it's to see what the outcome of that is. But we are hoping that it also on the other side is seen strategically what we're doing to reposition the island, strategically that we understood and understand that things had to change, and things changed. There's significant improvements over the last few years in terms of procedures and processes in the company. So hopefully with all of those changes that are well documented and seen, that we will not be hampered in our strategic items forward, because it will also be non-beneficial to the destination should we not be able to further tap in to the markets for us to be not able to bring some innovative ideas forward that would benefit the destination. So yes, I'm hoping not, Ralph, and we will continue on a steadfast role responsibly bringing these items forward, and we're just hoping for a sense of trust and cooperation from all of the stakeholders.
Okay, so recently as well, Port has been in positive light where you guys received the Sea Trade Award. But my question is, what makes our port stand out amongst others in the region? What is special about Port St Maarten?
One of the key things about Port St Maarten is just the main fact that once passengers disembark from the vessel, they are in a controlled area. So the area is controlled in terms of access. So you won't have persons immediately, as you see in some ports. As soon as you get off of the cruise pier, persons are trying to sell you watches and shirts and throwing monkeys on you and trying to sell you tours. No, it's organized. One of the key things for tourists and for anyone when they reach or go to somewhere that's new, they want to have a sense of place and a sense of time. They want to feel like, oh my gosh, big breath of air. I'm in a new place. I'm in St. Maarten. And they just want 5 or 10 minutes to look around, maybe take a few photos, maybe send a text to their family or give them a call and say, hey, we are in St. Maarten, without being disturbed, without being harassed, without being trying to sell things to them. That is one of the key things that we have. It's a controlled environment. Besides that, in that specific port, but besides that, we have a great destination. And that is one of the other things that propels St Maarten above. We have an amazing destination. We have amazing experiences. We have pretty good shopping, and some of the shopping and experiences, yes, can be enhanced, improved, maybe become a bit more innovative or in line with current trends that we are seeing. But all in all, we have a great product. St. Maarten is still also very safe. It's relatively safe, which is also a key component in the rating factors based on reviews and surveys received from guests. It's of utmost importance in that regard. So St. Maarten holds a very very dear role in many people's heart in terms of a vacation experience. But one of the key things, and so I started with a port, I went to the destination, I'll close this topic with a port, so a sandwich effect. But one of the key things that the port does, along with the government partners, is our relationship. So the fact that, any one of the cruise lines at any time of the day, any executive can send me a WhatsApp message or give me a call, and I will respond. And, there's members in my team that does that as well. And that also goes along with having direct relationships with key persons within government institutions as well. That if an idea comes, that we can pick up the phone and have that alignment, and I can return back to the cruise executive within 30 minutes, for example, and give an answer. For example, yesterday I received a call, and I have a follow-up call right after this interview from one of the, let's say, I would say the third largest cruise line in the world. And they, over the next 5 years, they have the most ships being built. Amazing. And they're looking at opportunities in home porting in St. Maarten, because they're seeing challenges in other destinations. But at the same time, we've had other discussions in terms of what we can offer as a destination. And what I did yesterday, when they said that, I immediately took the phone up and I called the CEO of the airport, and he answered immediately. And I had a great discussion with him in terms of saying, hey, the line is looking at bringing this ship to home port on a Friday, meaning persons may fly in Wednesday, Thursday,
Correct.
Maybe charter flights on Friday. Just initial indications. What do you think? We had a great discussion. I think we spoke for almost 10 minutes on the phone. And what I did is immediately email back the cruiser and say, hey, I had preliminary discussions with the CEO of the airport. We do think that it's an amazing opportunity for the destination. We don't, at this point in time, foresee any challenges. So let's proceed with these discussions in details. And that is one of the strengths, I believe, of the destination in general, where stakeholders has direct reach. And once you're a bit proactive and have those relationships with the leaders, or let's say the captains of the industries, because there's captains of various industries on island, you have those key relationships with those captains of the industries. That is what the other side respects. That is what
Gotcha.
Being a cruise executive respect. Because being on the other side, I've had situations where you're tracking down officials for 2, 3, 4 weeks before getting a response. And I know how frustrating that can be. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
I do understand how frustrating that can be. And at times, you'll get a call on Wednesday and they need to make a decision by Friday. And if you take a week to respond, that's a lost opportunity, right? So to close that point, the relationships is very important.
Okay, great. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Basically, the honest ones who truly benefited from the pandemic were, let's say, the stay-at-home stocks. So the Netflixes and Disneys and those type of things where, more people buy subscriptions, etc. And some of the pharmaceutical companies.
And home goods.
And home goods, and now also some of the cargo lines, because demand is inflating, shipping prices inflating, etc. But in terms of the financial position of the port, as for now, we are pretty stable. 2020 was not as bad as was initially forecasted. 2021 is going based on forecasts. However, of course, if you look at from Irma through now, it's more than 30 million in loss.
Wow.
So that's a huge hit to the company.
Yeah.
Again, no one foresee this. But from the time the pandemic started, management at the time started with making the necessary reductions and cuts in terms of expenditure and also downscaling the operations in general. Budgets were redone. We think by 2023, business should resume almost as pre-pandemic.
Okay.
And 23, 24, 25, our financial position will get better. And we will start to see those profits again. But of course, what do you do in terms of having a $30+ million loss? So we will remain very conservative in terms of our expenses. We will, and as I said in the first part of the interview, it's not in our list to lay anyone off. But yes, there are certain reductions that we would have to make further. And also along with the outcome of the temporary law, which is to be seen.
Correct.
And we will gauge, correct, and we
Yep.
will gauge our approach from there in that regard.
Okay. So there's of course there's been, and as you mentioned, ongoing discussions on home porting and its benefit to the island. So how can this really be a boost to the port, and will that be something that will be a staple in the port's business model?
Correct. Yes, let's use a word with a P, not a C. But but in terms of just small joke. But in terms of the home porting market, to be quite frankly, Ralph, home porting actually benefits the destination at large more than the port itself.
Okay.
Right? Because if it's home porting, it's a vessel home porting, or if it's in transit, we get the same head tax and the same dues from the vessel, etc.
Nothing extra.
Besides that, we charge a nominal fee for terminal usage, but it's nihil. We see it as an additional service of actually getting the vessels here.
Gotcha.
Because if we can't offer those services, then we will lose the ship. But if you look at the economic contribution in general, the destination benefits, the airport, for example, might be additional charter flights, extra fueling, more passengers, more head tax. When you look at it from a hospitality standpoint, statistics show 20 to 40% take a pre or post vacation on the destination. For some of the ships, we've seen persons fly into the island as much as 11 days prior to the cruise. So that is basically almost a full 2-week vacation on St Maarten prior to taking a 7-day cruise. So again, the hotels benefit, the car rentals, restaurants, night entertainment, etc. But from a port perspective, we see it as an additional service to lock the vessels in. But in terms of overall profits from that particular niche, not really.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah,
that's good to know. So my next question for you,
and just to add on that, Ralph, and that's why for us, from a port destination, from a port standpoint, it's imperative for us to have key discussions with local stakeholders moving ahead.
Yeah.
Because we are making and planning to make additional investments to better cater to this industry. Right now, our terminal can cater to about 1,000 passengers a day. There's requests, let's say, looking 2-3 years out from now, vessels hosting 2,500 passengers. Those are key discussions with the airport that we'll be having as well in terms of the logistics around that. But also, from a tourism bureau standpoint, also what are we going to do in terms of the marketing to that? How do we share the costs in line with the potential revenues that we'll be getting to make those strategic investments? So again, I think that is where the discussion will go in terms of how do we get the wider stakeholder group involved from that standpoint.
Okay. Are there any expansion of the piers taking place, or do you have any infrastructural projects in the works at the port?
Yes. So the first cruise pier, which we refer to as Cruise Pier South, was built back in between 1999 and 2001. And it was a different standard than our most recent cruise pier that was built in 2009. The first cruise pier also got damaged during past hurricanes, and most recently Hurricane Irma, where actually a huge chunk of the pier was destroyed. Actually looked like a cookie monster came and took a bite out of the cruise pier. And since that time, we made repairs on the surface of the cruise pier. However, as time passed, the pier is now 20 years. There's other maintenance works to be carried out on the predominantly the lower part of the pier and re-strengthening the surface of the pier. So yes, there's works in that regard that is in the pipeline. We're having discussions in terms of the approach and the methods, because various methods in terms of developing and also improving cruise piers. So we're looking at the methods now to determine what route we're going to take. In terms of the second cruise pier, there are ideas and there were requests in the past and discussions publicly in terms of if there's a need to expand the second cruise pier. And, when I say expand, for the record, I just want to make sure that the listening and viewing public don't think that we're going to have, if we expand from 6 ships to 8 ships, that we're going to have 8 cruise ships every day in the high season. Absolutely not. The challenge that we have, Ralph, is the current agreements that we have. Certain lines has exclusive rights to berths. So in other words, to the parking slots. We have 6 parking slots, and there's 2 lines that have exclusive rights to those 6 parking slots.
Okay, gotcha.
So if I want to strategically discuss with one of the other lines that I'm talking about now from home porting, etc., they need to plan 2 years in advance. Right now, they're even trying to plan 3 years in advance. And if there's out of each year for the next 3 years, there's 2 days out of 25 days where we say, hey, we have 6 ships, so you can come. They would not book in those 30 calls because they want a guarantee as well.
Gotcha.
That for those 30 days in a year, that they are guaranteed a slot. So if 2 slots, 2 days, they can't get a guarantee, as a destination, we lose 30 cruise calls. So you can do the calculations. 30 cruise calls at, let's say, 5,000 persons a call. That's 150,000 passengers gone. 150,000 passengers gone. So it's now coming to the point where we're going to have strategic discussions in terms of those exclusivities as well for those parking spaces, so to speak. And that would then give more solid, better solid analysis in terms of if we need to expand on that cruise pier, for example, in the next 3 years, the next 5 years. Maybe we need to wait the next 10 years until more vessels are deployed in the Caribbean. But that concise decision needs to be made in the coming time. Yes.
Okay, that's really good to know. That's really interesting. Yeah. One of the things that I would like to touch on, going back to the matter of the experiences, the Instagrammable moments, 2 things in particular, is one, how can we increase the expenditure of passengers? Because if I'm not mistaken, the estimate per passenger when they land here is what, $100?
So the last service that was done was around $145.
Okay, I'm higher than 100.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. But also, I'm aware that some of the businesses itself operating at the port, quite the same in terms of you have a handful of jewelry or retail stores. So how are you guys also looking to enhance, that experience for passengers? And vary the business, the businesses.
Ralph, I see it quite opposite. And most of the stores, if not almost all of the stores at a port, actually have satellite shops in town. So at the time, it was looked at not to really create a competitive environment between shops at a port and shops downtown. But at the end of the day, Ralph, I see it quite reverse in terms of making passengers spend. I believe in creating a demand. Right? If I go to a destination, there's not one person can make me spend. I will spend if I see a product or services that I'm interested in.
Gotcha.
And I think from a business community standpoint and, from a port standpoint, I mentioned it that we will definitely be sharing trends of what we're seeing. But from a business community standpoint, from an entrepreneurship standpoint, it's also of paramount importance for the business community to also offer the experiences, the services, and the products that is being looked for, right? And I think that is where it goes. And I mentioned it quite recently as well. I said, look, if you're selling a product such as a 3310 Nokia that was hype and the best thing ever back in 2001, you can't think in this day and age that you'll still sell a 3310 in a store. No, you need to upgrade to an iPhone 12 or even 13 these days. And I just use that simple example in the fact that also the demands of the passengers have changed. And, some of them are looking for unique experiences. Some of them are looking for actionable activities. And, that is missing. If you look in town right now, for example, Ralph, if you look at Front Street and Back Street, there's not one sports lounge, not one sports bar where, and I don't want to sound, men goes to sports bars, but surveys show that, women and children go and shop. And most of the time, the men would go into the sports bar, maybe smoke a cigar and have a few drinks. Where is that? The honest options is really the casino. And there's persons who don't necessarily want to go into the casino. So, if you look at that as a simple example, and, it goes, of course, certain models work in certain real estate areas because of the rent.
Yeah.
There's certain types of stores that just can't pay the rent. So that is something in which we all understand. But just in general, if you look at a product mix, it is something to be looked at.
Okay. And so my question, what I'll add to that is how can, not necessarily for you to give people business ideas, but how can, the business community in that case enhance their marketing, their product offering to really tap into, the guests that the port facilitates?
I think the one tool that I think is still underutilized locally is the presence of social media and the continuous updating of your products and your services on social media. There's certain tour operators here who basically told me, listen, we don't do no type of marketing. We don't market on board of vessels. We don't do any of that. We don't sign any agreements with any lines. But, because of our social media presence, because of the using of TripAdvisor and YouTube and, Facebook, LinkedIn, Expedia, etc., they're able to capture a huge group of people who at times they're booked out without spending $1 really and truly in hard marketing material. So I do think to a great extent we underutilize that as a destination. And I would definitely implore in many business to follow suit in that regard, because there's a lot of businesses who don't even have a social media presence.
That's
right?
true. Or details on Google.
Correct. And again, it's not about creating a platform and updating it once a month. No, it's being active and sharing posts and asking people to share posts, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't happen.
Gotcha. Okay. So one of the things we've seen recently making news as far as ports in general concerned is the supply chain bottlenecks. And can you talk a bit on how this is affecting St. Maarten and what ways can our businesses and people prepare for that impact?
So we haven't really had any direct impact in terms of delays to the destination as yet.
Okay.
We all know the high season is coming up, and that is always challenging, especially around the holidays. Just yesterday, I had a meeting with someone, and the person said, they need to get their orders in from now to assure that they get this stuff during the holidays. But in terms of the bottlenecks, indeed, Ralph, it's truly based on too much demand for the industry at this point in time. There's not enough containers to ship goods. And that has caused a huge delay. It has caused shipping prices to an extent to triple or quadruple. Prices of containers from Asia is now 3 times as much. And, unfortunately, eventually it will be reflected in the prices in the stores here.
Yeah.
Of course, that's not to be controlled by the port. Because we don't handle that element.
Correct.
But, that will definitely reflect. I mean, I've heard someone mention recently that plywood basically doubled 2.5 times the last few months.
Yeah.
And that is the unfortunate reality.
Even goods like cooking oil, for example.
You see, I haven't taken note of that, but you will see the differences. And we would hope that not because the retailers see this as an opportunity, that they also hyperinflate prices beyond necessity, right? That they don't also take advantage, because like I said, there's some companies that are actually profiting from what is happening now. There's certain shipping lines that are actually profiting from the increased rates for shipping. So, you don't want, what we would not want is for the industry to get overbalanced. We would want to get it back in balance because, I mean, for example, if you realize, Ralph, that your company has a supply of 1,000 containers, and monthly you're now making 25% more than prior to the pandemic, from a business person, you would say, boy, let me get 1,000 more containers and then level the prices. But you might have some companies who actually milk the fact that they only have 1,000 and they're getting top dollar for the 1,000, and then the balance will be out of proportion. Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, it's really to see what that would cause. Also the effect what that would have on the banking sector as well. Right now, and not to go too far, and I'll stop on that point, but right now, there's banks offering great interest rates, some 5%, some 4-point-something%. But will they pull the handbrakes on you in the next 6 to 12 months and say, hey, we see prices gone out of whack, so now we need to increase your interest rate back to 7%, 6.5%. Will that happen?
Correct.
That's something.
Discussion.
Correct.
Well, you giving me homework with that one. So.
Correct. And it all puts me to think as well on do you make, because we are all young, Ralph. We all have our personal ambitions. We all want to build or buy a home. We all want to focus on, and from a professional standpoint, that is what you really want to focus on.
Correct.
But then it also makes
Securing
you think
family,
about the timing.
basically.
Right?
Yeah.
It makes you think about the timing, and this is the worst time for you to have inflated prices, because you're having inflated prices. Okay, fine, interest rates are a bit down now, but you don't have any grace periods. A lot of people out of work to an extent, and then the 12.5% cut. How does it work? So those are questions. What I'm sharing here, those are questions that came, from employees to us, and as one of the leading companies, these are all things that we also have to be cognizant about what our people may face or are facing, and try and see how best we can, again, like I said, you're saying, okay, this needs to be cut on one end, but at the same time expecting a game. I mean, how long can that continue? I'm not sure.
Yeah, indeed. And one of the things I thought of, as you spoke about the difficulties and impact of rising costs, is also the fact that we don't do much production and exporting of goods as well. Yeah. But I have a question.
There's no factories in St Maarten.
Yeah. So we do have people who have, we have local products that are exportable, but I guess that is another conversation. But I was curious about, the fact that we also have the friend side, which, so St Maarten is one island overall. Do you guys do any sort of business with them? How does that work? Are you strictly just limited to...
I think a few times a year there's some discussions that we have with stakeholders from the counterpart on the friend side. I know a few years ago there were discussions as well in terms of having sort of co-op marketing, so more from a marketing perspective in terms of how you position a destination. I know that's been a conversation for the last few years. There were some collaborative efforts at cruise conferences, etc., with the French counterparts from a marketing perspective. From a business perspective, I think it's still a bit separated, and everyone has their strategic items to be executed. And, from a Dutch standpoint, from a Dutch port standpoint, but I think, and you use the word as well, Ralph, from a one destination standpoint, we should look at, and exactly what I alluded to earlier, passengers are looking for experiences. And it's good to invest in infrastructure and hardscaping, etc. But at the end of the day, when these people come to the destination, they focus on the experiences that they would have on the destination. So I do think that there's a lot of opportunity from a friend standpoint as well to focus on the experiences that can be offered to the passengers and create new dynamic elements, create new shopping experiences. And I would hope to see that moving ahead.
Okay. So looking at a pretty old headline from a while back, there was a proposal made or discussion had about potential of global ports managing our port, and is this something that has came up again?
That is
discussions on that.
Yeah, that is quite an interesting discussion, Ralph. And yes, we've been asked about that question, but in reality, as a port, we've never had any presentations, requests, proposals, or nothing from global ports. So from a port perspective, for me, there's no discussion to have on that particular topic.
Okay.
As directly as a port, we have not been engaged in that regard, and we hold a concession to the port, and we have not have any of those discussions. Of course, we know some of the persons within the company, and we see them at conferences and have discussions. But in terms of formally having discussions, absolutely not.
Gotcha.
And if there's discussions to have, it's discussions to have. But at this point in time, not. And, I think we can still be proud of our locals, our local professionals.
Indeed.
Who actually have been running the port for the last 30-odd plus years.
Correct.
Actually, the port is now, 58 years in its modern stage. We should be proud of that, where we came from. I do believe that as a company, we have a lot of knowledge in-house. Where needed, we get advisors and consultants for support. But from a destination standpoint, I think we do it well. And I think even at C-Trade Award, we are back also is a testimony to the commitment of the destination to the industry.
Yeah.
Strange enough, two of the other competitors in the top three, one of the ports is actually managed by Global Ports. So as a destination, I think it's a great thing that we were able to win
on your own feet,
award.
basically.
Yeah. But we are open to all discussions, Ralph. It's a business environment. At the end of the day, for us, it's most interesting and important that whatever strategic discussions and contracts that sign moving ahead is first and foremost in benefit of the port, that we can improve the financial situation in the port. And of course, second on that, and that's in discussion with the shareholder, is that it's beneficial to the destination as well, that mutually we can look at strategic elements that the destination needs in the next 10 to 15 years that will complement the cruise product. So that is what I can say on that particular topic.
Okay. So one of the investments I know that the port also made is in regards to water plants.
Mm-hmm.
How has that been, since that has been launched? And are you looking to develop anything similar, any other location or maybe in town?
At this point in time, not. Water plants indeed was a key and is a key product for us, tying into something else I'll chime in on, which I said last week in Parliament. But water plants, one of the key challenges, of course, and it's in town in general, is parking. Right now, Walter Plants is a beautiful spot where families go with the kids and play in the fountains and take amazing photos. There's good restaurants there. I do think that there's more potential for the area, but we do need to find a way in solving the parking issue. It has been a challenge, and it is still a challenge. But it's a great product. We're looking at revitalizing the area in terms of introducing one or two new locations there, retailers there. So it is a great location strategically. In terms of Phillipsburg in general, I think one of the questions that I asked, and in which we have in a high-level plan, is the collective discussion of should the boardwalk continue down to, let's say, where the former Great Bay Hotel is. And
deeper into Down Street.
Further down, offering new commercial opportunities for those property owners down there, but also, for example, like Walter Plants being in the center, right? So if you look from the greenhouse to the old Great Bay, Walter Plants is almost center on that strip. So, you walk from greenhouse, you reach to Captain Hodge Wharf. That's a stop.
Yeah.
Then you go to Walter Plants. That's another stop. And then you'll have another stop to them. So strategically, it was developed in that regard, looking at years ahead. Ralph, if we were to increase the volumes of passengers to the destination. So let's say we go from, there's 1 year we did 2 million passengers. I think that's around the carrying capacity, 2 million, 2.2 million. But in that regard, there must be alternative experiences as well from a passenger distribution standpoint.
Yeah.
To alleviate, the traffic on the road.
Yeah.
So you might have more people walking. You might have more people taking taxis. More people, maybe they might be taking bicycles.
Which you've seen recently.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
But then it must have alternative areas as well. So that is one of the things that we ask about.
Okay, and I would like to close off on a personal note, not too personal, but more so in terms of being now that you're CEO, you've been used to this corporate environment and stuff. But how do you, I would say, work towards your personal development and being able to effectively make decisions?
Ralph, I think what I've seen the last while as well is time management is key. So I have certain times in a day and certain days in the week I just don't take meetings, for example. So I think time management is of paramount importance.
Gotcha.
As you get swamped on a lot of the smaller details rather than looking at strategically what you should be focusing on. So that is something that I'm pretty strict on. But in general, in terms of personal development and growth, every day I get up and I watch myself in the mirror, Ralph, I think I ask myself a new question in terms of a challenge. And as long as I've known myself, I've done that. For me, it's just important to be a person of respect, a person who I can help others as well. Sometimes I get messages say, boy, I can remember where we was and what we used to be doing, and I'm so happy. But on the same note, I'm also one who would like to inspire the next generation as well, that we can believe in our own, that we can believe that we can do it, that, we may not always be the best, but we can do it. And along the way, we will learn where needed, and we will be open to advice as well. I fully believe in a golden voice. And for me, that's something that's important, that most of the time my associates are it's most of the time with older persons as well, to get that knowledge and that wisdom, to be the sponge in the room. For the last 5 years of my life, every conference I've been to, every strategic meeting I've been in, every interview, I was the youngest. I was always the youngest in the room, not necessarily meaning the amateur in the room, but the youngest and one who's also sitting and listening and learning and making those notes and referencing as well. So in terms of that, in that regard, Ralph, I do see potentially what I'll be doing in the next, let's say, 10 years. For now, I wouldn't mention on that.
But I'll ask you 10 years from now.
We'll probably have the discussion before that. But, I do think it's good for persons to ask themselves that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I always ask key persons that question who is close to me in the environment. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And for me, it also says, what I should do to help them to get there. Because from a leadership perspective, I believe in how do I help you get there? So by that, Ralph.
Okay, thank you so much, and I appreciate that response as well. And to our listeners and viewers, you've been listening to the News Behind the News, and I had quite an engaging, interesting conversation with Mr. Alex Gumbs. Thank you once again, and take care.
Thank you.